A man stopped in front of a gate and read the 9 lines cut across the top of it. Here is how they begin. Through me, the way is to the city dolent. Through me, the way is to eternal dole. Through me, the way among the people lost. And here is the last of them, the one you already know. All hope abandon, ye who enter in. Except that is probably not the version in your head. The line everybody can recite goes, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. And that wording is not in this translation, and it is not in any translation old enough to be out of copyright. It comes from modern renderings that are still owned by somebody. So the single most famous sentence about hell in the English language is a sentence Dante's oldest English translators never wrote. Hold on to that, because this whole episode is about the difference between the version you remember and the version on the page. Now, what did the man say when he finished reading the gate? Not a prayer, not a vow. He turned to his guide and said, "Their sense is, Master, hard to me." He said he did not understand it. That is the first thing that happens in hell. Everyone knows what the Inferno is. 9 circles, a punishment for each sin, a tour of the machinery of damnation. I want to point at something the tour skips. This poem is not mainly a system. It is a list. And the list has names on it. Real people, most of them recently dead, a great many of them from the author's own city, and at least one of them not dead yet. Today, in 20 minutes, I'm reading the Inferno, in Henry Longfellow's translation of 1867. The most famous map of hell ever drawn is, underneath, a register of who did what. A man of about 35 woke up in a wood and could not work out how he had got there. Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost. Notice the pronoun, our life, not my life. The first line of the poem hands the situation to the reader before it hands it to the narrator. He gets out of the trees, sees a hill with light on it, and starts up, and 3 animals come down at him, a leopard, then a lion, then the one that stops him, a she-wolf, that with all hungerings seemed to be laden in her meagerness. Starving and still hungry, he turns back down into the dark, and that is the whole of his heroism at this point. He retreats. Then somebody is standing in the empty valley, and here is the first thing our narrator says out loud in the entire poem. His words are, "Have pity on me," spoken to a shape in an empty valley before he even knows what it is. Have pity on me. Remember that. In about 15 minutes, a voice in this same poem is going to tell him that pity down here is the worst sin available. And both those sentences were written by the same person. The figure answers that he is not a man, that he was one once. It is Virgil, dead 1,300 years, and he has been sent. Sent by whom and why is a whole chapter I am going to skip, and I want to be honest that skipping it costs something real. It is the engine of the entire poem, and it has a woman's name on it. What matters for the next 20 minutes is the arrangement they reach. The dead poet will walk the living one down through the whole thing, and the living one will take notes. Just inside that gate, before hell proper even starts, there is a crowd running. They are chasing a banner that never stops whirling, and wasps and hornets are working on them, and the blood runs down to their feet where worms take it. Dante asks who they are, and the answer is the coldest thing in the poem. These have no longer any hope of death, and this blind life of theirs is so debased, they envious are of every other fate. They cannot even die again. And then, no fame of them the world permits to be, misericord and justice both disdain them. Neither mercy nor justice wants them. Not heaven, not hell, not the record. And then Virgil closes the subject in one line. Let us not speak of them, but look and pass. Who are they? People who, alive, took no side, who committed to nothing and therefore risked nothing. And here is the detail that makes the rest of this episode work, so I want to be very exact about it. This is the one group in the entire Inferno that Dante refuses to name. Everywhere else he is relentless with names. Here he gives none. There is one exception, and it is not really an exception. He says he recognized the shade of him who made through cowardice the great refusal, and then declines to say which him. Scholars have argued about that identification for 700 years, which is exactly the punishment. Think about what that means as a piece of design. The worst thing this poem can do to you is not fire. It is leaving you out of the list. Have you ever been in an organization where the real punishment was not being disciplined, but being left off the email? 4 men came walking toward him across a dim field, and his guide told him their names as they approached. That one is Homer, poet sovereign. He who comes next is Horace, the satirist. The third is Ovid, and the last is Lucan. This is the first circle, and it is not a punishment in any way we would recognize. There is no fire, no ice, no screaming. There is a castle, a green meadow, a fire burning in a hemisphere of darkness, and a large number of extremely impressive dead people having conversations. The sighing is the only sound. They are here because they were born before Christianity or outside it, and that is the entire charge. Homer, Horace, Ovid, Lucan, Aristotle, Socrates and Plato, Saladin sitting apart, alone, and the poets take Dante in. They talk for a while, and then they walk on together, and Dante quietly counts himself into the group. I want to be clear about what he has just done, because it is astonishing. He has written a poem in which the greatest poets who ever lived come out to meet him personally and accept him as a colleague. And he has put that scene in hell, in the one circle where he clearly thinks the sentence is unfair. That is the second kind of list in this book, not the register of the condemned, the guest list you want to be on. Both of them are made of names, and he is running both at once. So which is limbo, a punishment or a green room? He never resolves it. The people there did nothing wrong and are here forever, and the poem simply lets that sit. A judge sat at the entrance to the second circle, wrapping his tail around himself, and the number of turns was the floor you went to. There standeth Minos horribly and snarls, examines the transgressions at the entrance, judges, and sends according as he girds him. No hearing, no argument, no appeal. The confession happens automatically. The tail goes round, and down you go. Below him, the air is moving. The infernal hurricane that never rests hurtles the spirits onward in its rapine. These are the people who let desire run the decision. They are blown about permanently, which is a fairly obvious metaphor, and Dante knows it. What he does with it is not obvious at all. He asks to speak to 2 of them, and they come out of the storm together, and one of them talks. Her name is Francesca. She was murdered with her husband's brother. Dante's opening line to her is not a question about sin. It is this: "Thine agonies, Francesca, sad and compassionate to weeping make me." He tells a damned woman that she is making him cry. Then he asks her how it started, and she gives the answer everyone quotes. There is no greater sorrow than to be mindful of the happy time in misery. And then she tells him it started with a book. They were reading a romance together alone, and they got to the part where the lovers kiss, and the man beside her kissed her, and she says, "Galeotto was the book, and he who wrote it. That day no farther did we read therein. A book did it, a book, and the man who wrote the book." She is saying that to a man who is writing a book. He fell over. That is what happens next, and he describes it without any dignity at all. "I swooned away as if I had been dying, and fell, even as a dead body falls." The author of Hell hears one testimony from one of the damned and loses consciousness. Sit with the structure of that for a second, because it is the whole thesis of this episode in one image. The man who designed this place, who decided which sin goes on which level, who is at this moment writing the sentence you are hearing, cannot get through the second circle standing up. He comes round in the third, in cold, heavy rain that never stops, on ground that is mud, with a 3-headed dog working through the bodies. Somebody sitting in that mud recognizes him and sits up. "You citizens were wont to call me Chiacco. For the pernicious sin of gluttony, I, as thou seest, am battered by this rain." You citizens. He is a Florentine, and so is Dante, and they knew the same streets. And look at the reply. This is the pattern the whole book runs on. Ciacco, thy wretchedness weighs on me so that it to weep invites me. Then Ciacco does the thing that everybody down here does eventually. He asks a favor. He asks to be brought back to people's minds up top. They all ask for that. Almost every named soul in this poem asks to be remembered, or begs not to be. And either way, it is the same request. Do something about my name, which tells you what hell actually is in this book. It is not a prison. It is a publication. A man stood up out of a burning tomb with the lid pushed back and looked him over as if he were disappointed. This is Farinata of the Uberti, the leader of the faction that beat Dante's family in a war, dead about 30 years. And of everything a man on fire for eternity might say to a living visitor, here is what he opens with. He wants the family name. Who were thine ancestors? He wants the surname. Dante gives it, and Farinata raises his eyebrows and says, fiercely adverse have they been to me and to my fathers. 2 men in hell, one of them alive, and the first order of business is which families they belong to. That is not a moral allegory. That is a small city with long memories, and everybody in it is on file. Further down there is a wood that is not a wood. The trees are black and twisted, and the leaves are not green. Virgil tells him to break off a twig, and he does, without much thought, and so from that splinter issued forth together both words and blood, whereat I let the tip fall, and stood like a man who is afraid. The tree talks. The tree is a person. Men once we were, and now are changed to trees. And the voice adds that his hand should have been more merciful. I find this the single most modern moment in the poem. He did damage before he understood there was somebody on the other end, and the discovery arrives as blood on his fingers and a voice asking why. Every one of us has snapped off a twig in a comment box. He gets to hear what it sounded like. An old man on a plain of burning sand caught his sleeve and looked up into his face, and Dante recognized him through the burns. The sand is hot, and fire is falling on it slowly and constantly, in flakes, and the people there have to keep moving. His teacher is one of them. Here is the whole exchange, and I want you to listen to the pronouns. Are you here, Sir Brunetto? And Brunetto Latini answers, May it not displease thee, O my son, if a brief space with thee, Brunetto Latini, backward return, and let the trail go on. Ser Brunetto. The respectful form, the title, the surname, spoken by a man to somebody he has personally placed in hell. And the answer comes back, my son. They walk together, the old man on the burning sand below and the younger man up on the raised bank so the fire cannot reach him, and they talk about Florence and about the boy's future. And Brunetto tells him he will be treated badly by his city. Then he has to run to catch up with his group, and Dante watches him go. Now, Dante did not have to put him here. Nobody made him. There is no historical requirement that this particular man appear in this particular poem. He chose to write his own teacher into eternal fire, by name, with the honorific attached. And then he wrote himself standing above him being polite. What do you do with a man you owe everything to and cannot excuse? He did the strangest possible thing. He condemned him and paid his respects in the same breath, and left both in the poem. A pope planted upside down in a hole in the rock, with only his legs out and the soles of his feet on fire, heard footsteps and started talking. He got the name wrong. Dost thou stand there already? Dost thou stand there already, Boniface? By many years the record lied to me. Read that again. The soul in the hole is Pope Nicholas III, and he thinks the person standing over him is Pope Boniface VIII, arriving early to take his turn in the same hole. Inside the poem, it is the spring of the year 1300, and Boniface is alive, in Rome, running the church. Dante has written a scene in which hell is keeping a seat warm for a man who had not died yet. You cannot do that with an allegory. You can only do that with a name. And now the other half of it. In the next circle are the fortune tellers, and their heads have been turned to face backwards, so that everything they see is behind them, and their tears run down between their shoulders. Dante looks at that and starts crying, and his guide turns on him. Art thou too of the other fools? Here pity lives when it is wholly dead. Who is a greater reprobate than he who feels compassion at the doom divine? You fool! Feeling sorry for these people is itself the sin. Both of those passages are by the same writer, working on the same poem, probably in the same year. And the crying is not a one-off, which you can check by counting his own words. Across the 34 cantos, weep, wept, weeping, and tears turn up 41 times between them. Pity and compassion, another 14. He loses consciousness twice. His very first line of dialogue in the poem was a request for pity, and by the 20th canto, his own guide is telling him it is the one thing that damns you. He built a machine that damns people by name, and then wrote himself into it as the man who keeps breaking down over its verdicts. He is not resolving that. He is not even hiding it. He wrote the rebuke down and left it in. A tall flame with a divided tip came along the ridge, and the voice inside it told them how he died. This is Ulysses, and he is here for a piece of cleverness, and he does not discuss that at all. What he wants to talk about is his last voyage. Old, home, finished, and he put a crew together anyway and sailed west, out past the last landmark anybody knew, into open water where nobody had a reason to go. He tells Dante the speech he used on his men, and it is the best writing in the book. Consider ye the seed from which ye sprang. Ye were not made to live like unto brutes, but for pursuit of virtue and of knowledge. You are not animals, you were built for this. And they went. We of the oars made wings for our mad flight, 5 months of it, until a mountain came up out of the sea, and a storm came off it, and turned the ship 3 times, and put the bow under, until the sea above us closed again. Now hold that against everything else in this poem. Dante is a man who assigns punishments with a very steady hand. He has just spent 25 cantos filing people, and here he writes the most stirring argument for human curiosity in medieval literature, gives it to a man he has condemned to be a walking flame forever, and does not answer it. No correction follows. Virgil does not step in. Nobody says the voyage was wrong. So was the flight mad? Or was it the only sane thing anybody in this book does? Dante had good reason to know the answer. He wrote this in exile, under a sentence of death if he went home. A man, frozen in ice up to his neck, stopped chewing on the skull in front of him long enough to explain what had happened to his children. His name is Ugolino. He was a count. He was locked in a tower with his sons and grandsons, and the door was nailed shut. He describes the days going past, and the boys dying one at a time asking him for help. Then he finishes, and the last thing he says about it is one sentence. Then hunger did what sorrow could not do. That line has been argued about for centuries, and Dante leaves it exactly that ambiguous, and then moves on. Below the ice is the bottom, and the bottom is not fire. There is an enormous winged thing frozen in at the waist, and when I beheld 3 faces on his head, 3 faces, 3 mouths, and a man being chewed in each of them, Judas in the middle, and in the others, Brutus and Cassius. The worst thing in the universe, and it is still a naming exercise. Even the last punishment has a guest list. Then Virgil picks him up and climbs down the frozen body, and at the middle they turn over and start going up. They walk a hidden road in the dark for a long time without resting, and the last line of the whole canticle is this: Thence we came forth to rebehold the stars. The way out of hell is not a door, and it is not forgiveness. It is walking all the way down past the worst of it and coming out the other side. He wrote a register of everyone who could not do that. Then he put himself in it, crying at almost every entry, and climbed out.